So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Beverly Knopfsinger and I are co-chairs of the Water Awareness and Outreach Committee, and this is our committee's second webinar, and we're really very excited to be able to bring it to you. We are neophytes in the webinar business, but so far our first one was very successful, and we hope this one will be live up to your expectations. We are appreciative of your support and encouragement by opting to be with us on the webinar. So just want to take a minute to tell you a little bit about our committee. Our mission is to raise awareness on important issues in our industry, provide suggestions and resources for utilities to communicate, whether it be to elected officials or to the public. If you haven't been to our website on the sections website, our page, please do. We list a lot of resources that you can look at for communication information and a toolkit. Today, we want to discuss outreaching to the public during a crisis, and especially with the rise in social media as an important platform, something that we all need to know more about. I also want to mention to you that in the annual AWWA State of the Water Industry Report, one of the top challenges reported by all the people that were surveyed was customer community relations outreach. How to do it, when to do it, and how proactive should you be. So clearly by your participation, this would indicate you also have a very specific need to know more about communication and social media. Today we're going to focus on the social media tools. Each webinar that we do, we plan to not only focus on a general outreach activities, but we also want to spotlight a speaker, and we're doing that today, and that speaker covers a high-profile water industry topic. So I want to, before I turn this over to Bridget, let you know that some of our future webinars are up on the screen for you to see, at least 2 of them, and this is what our committee has come up with, and we did conduct a survey to the membership and ask for suggestions, and so this is what we're planning. If you've got some other suggestions, by all means let Geneva know. We'd like to hear from you. Thanks again for being on the call, and now I'm going to turn the next segment of the webinar over to Bridget Butterly. Bridget is a communications specialist with Arcadis, and she's located in Chicago. So Bridget, are you there?
I am here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, Bridget, we can. I have most everyone else on mute. So if you do have a question, if I could just interject, if we do have a question, please feel free to put it into the chat box located there on your go-to pane. And if not, we will have time at the end of each presentation for questions.
Okay, great. Karen, thanks for the introduction, and Geneva for getting us started and rolling through all our little hiccups here. So as Karen indicated, I'm going to give a little discussion on the art and science of crisis communications today. And this is a pretty meaty topic, and I could probably talk about it for longer than the window we have here. But it's an important one because we all know that a crisis can really derail a project or a community effort. And I think you'll see as I talk today that the thing that I'm going to focus on a lot is really the prevention of the crisis, using communication and tools proactively so you don't get to that stage, that crisis stage. So just a little bit about myself before I get into the meat of this. As Karen said, I work for Arcadis out of Chicago. I started my career about 17 years ago, and when I first started, I was much more on the technical side of things. I do a lot of environmental remediation projects. So when I started, I was, out in the field collecting soil samples and, phase 1, phase 2, and some remediation work. But since joining Arcadis about 8 years ago, I've sort of switched to the communication side. So I work with a lot of technical teams, helping them just really communicate the science and the engineering that they do so well. I help them communicate it effectively to whatever that audience may be, whether it's the public or agencies or really whoever. So, and you know, I do a lot of community outreach and engagement, and get into some of these crisis communications now and then too. But as I said, we try to prevent them from happening. So, and just wanted to touch on again, you know, some of the objectives that I'm hoping to get through today. You know, sort of transmitting some of the knowledge about, you know, again, proactively communicating with your audience, whatever it may be, to avoid that crisis. And if that crisis comes up, helping, you know, manage that situation and kind of come up their side and still be successful with your project. And then talk a little bit about, you know, risks associated with some of these high-profile projects, and again, how we can use some practical tools to manage them. And I've got a case study that I'll go through from a project I've worked on, and maybe can show a little bit some of the pitfalls and problems that we run into. So, you know, why should we care about this? You know, what happens if there's a communication crisis? You know, what's the big deal? You know, it happens all the time, right? We see it in the news. You know, these companies seem to come out the other side and they're okay. But we should care. As I said, I work on a lot of environmental projects, and I'll touch on some of these as I go through. But a lot of times in remediation projects, you know, the communication is often ignored unless it's mandated by, you know, a regulatory agency. You know, we don't really do it if we don't have to. But it's important, even if it's not mandated, because you can delay your project. You know, get delayed schedule by months, or really derail a project completely. Have to, you know, find a new avenue to complete your project. You can miss key regulatory deadlines or contract requirements. Certainly, cost overruns are an issue. You know, if you're proactive about your communications, it's going to cost you a little bit of money up front, but it's still cheaper than, you know, after things really blow up on you. And you have to spend a lot more money to kind of get back to square one where you wanted to be. And often you might have to rework some engineering. You know, maybe you have a certain location set for your project, and the public, you know, is up in arms about it, and you have to find another site and completely rework it. And that's not to say, you know, some of the effects on a company's reputation if things go wrong. As I said, a lot of times these companies can come out okay on the other side, but a lot of times they can't. And there can be some loss of trust in the community associated with that, and that's, again, something that's difficult to overcome. So next slide, Geneva. So communication, it's a huge field. You know, it's a big field of study. There's a lot of information about how to do it effectively. And again, you know, a lot more than I can cover in this time. You know, there's lots of things to consider, from your audience, your messaging, the timing. And, you know, sometimes even if you do it all right, you can still get in some trouble along the way. But again, I think, as I said at the beginning, I think the important message to take away is to try to be proactive about it and make it an integrated part of your project. That way it's a focus and a priority, and I think that sets you up for, you know, a better opportunity for success than if it's ignored. I'll give a couple examples, again, from some remediation projects I've worked on. One is a site in Fort Bragg, California, where they're cleaning up some dioxins. And dioxins are nasty, you know, everybody knows. But they were working to clean up this site and doing something beneficial for the community, but they didn't really communicate anything to the community. And you know, people actually just saw these huge semi-trucks hauling this, you know, impacted soil off the site, and had no idea what was going on, and got upset and were misinformed, and that led to some fear. And we actually had people, you know, laying down in the road trying to prevent these trucks from taking the dioxin away. So, you know, that was a project, again, you know, with some of those impacts that I talked about. Project delays, certainly there were some cost overruns associated with that. In the end, they were able to turn things around, but they had to do a lot of work to kind of get the community on their side. Another project I had, you know, I mentioned, you know, having to rework engineering. I worked on a site in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where they were remediating some PCBs, and they had a site selected to build a landfill to dispose of these PCB impacted soil, and the community became aware of it, were not informed up front, and were furious, and completely derailed the project to the point where they had to select a completely different site and, you know, rework all their engineering, all their design. So those are just a couple examples, but you can see how things can really go off the rails pretty quick. So, and I'll actually take a little bit of a closer look at how that can happen. If you want to go to the next slide, this little graphic here. So, you know, you start with your project, and let's say you are communicating something to the community, some message that you want to let them know, you know, whether it be why you're doing this certain improvement project or whatever it may be. And you give out that message, and you think you've got all the information covered, but you maybe haven't thought through, you know, how the community will feel about it. And once they hear that if there's gaps in that message, they're going to perceive perhaps something about that project. They're going to maybe fill in some of those gaps. Again, you know, when I'm talking about these remediation projects, certainly, you know, there's a lot of fear associated with, you know, impacted soil or, you know, quality of life issues. So people kind of fill in those gaps in their head and perceive, you know, what they are about that message, and fill in what information may be lacking. And then, you know, maybe they, again, can get emotional about it, right? I talked about that fear that can enter in when people are misinformed. And that kind of turns around a little bit, and it really becomes ingrained in them. And then once that becomes ingrained, you know, that's when they're going to go talk to their neighbors, or get out on social media and tell other people about it, or, you know, go to their local officials and try to change what's going on. So, you know, it's sort of a cycle. And I think the main message here is, as it says there, you know, facts are not enough. You know, you can tell people what's going on, but you have to really think through what's going to motivate them and how they're going to feel about it, how it's going to really affect them on a you know, day-to-day level, which is tricky. It takes some work, but again, it's one of those things that can set you up for success down the road. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of another case study example here. This is a project in Geneva. If you just want to flip to that slide, that Engineering Marvel slide. This is a large urban reservoir in the Chicago area. You know, really cool engineering project. I mean, they took an old quarry and converted it to this reservoir to help with flooding issues and CSOs in the region. And, you know, there was a lot of build-up to this project in the media, and, you know, talking about, you know, how cool the engineering is, and, you know, and you know, just how awesome it is. And it was. But they didn't spend a lot of time, you know, talking to the communities. And if you go to the next slide, kind of looking at the bigger picture, you know, you can see that there's people living right next to this thing, right? So you don't really communicate with those people directly as the project was building up. And then when they did roll it out, and there was a first major storm event, the odors were horrendous. And they didn't necessarily think about that from a technical perspective, but they certainly didn't think about it from a communications perspective. So they didn't, they sort of caught flat-footed, so to speak, when you know, people started complaining about these odors, and they hadn't really thought it through, and didn't really have a plan to address them. And that kind of doubled the angst in the community, because the people felt they weren't listened to. So I look at this case study sort of from, you know, two avenues. You know, you can say, I actually worked through at another seminar, we had a kind of a group discussion about, you know, what could they have done beforehand to make things go better, and then once they're in it, what can they do? And really, a lot of the tools and the things you would do are very similar, but after the crisis hits, it's, you know, a little bit more stressful and a little bit more hairy. So, you know, before the project hit, you know, they should have been proactive and setting up open houses in this community that you see there, you know, having meetings, sending out flyers, you know, letting people know what's going to happen, setting up a system to handle complaints. You know, they didn't really have a system in place, so when people would call, you know, it wasn't really clear, you know, whether there would be any follow-up, or people weren't sure if their concerns were really listened to. So it made it difficult for the, you know, people, again, focused on the engineering to handle with this communication crisis. And, you know, in any situation like this, again, you have to put yourself in the people's shoes, right? So what if you lived there? You know, I'm sure during the construction they perhaps were dealing with some dust and some increased traffic during the construction. So kind of putting yourself in their shoes and thinking through it can really help you sort of set up a system, again, proactively, so that people feel informed. You know, even if, you know, they had a system set up in place at the beginning and people had complaints about odors, they would feel reassured that they were being listened to and it was expected. And, you know, kind of set things up so there's not a crisis. You know, for many of you that, you know, work on these projects when you're dealing with the public, you know, it can be challenging to make everybody happy 100% of the time, and that's true of everything, so you're always going to have an outlier that's upset. But, you know, if you can get most of the people happy and get some people on your side, it's much better in the long run. So, Geneva, if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools I just touched on a little bit more. You know, and here's a list, you know, communications toolbox. There's a lot of stuff here, and, you know, there's lots of other things. I mean, you just have to think about print media, social media, which Beverly's going to talk to a little bit after I'm done, probably a lot better than I will because she's an expert. But looking at other tools, you know, what tools can you use to communicate to your audience? And, you know, and in this case, it's the public. You know, what's going to help them understand what's going on? If you want to switch, Geneva, to fact sheets and newsletters, I mean, these are tools that we use often. And, you know, you see them, you know, across, you know, all kinds of companies and in the private and public sector use these. And they're nice because they can be audience sensitive and focus on the key issues. Again, thinking back to that case study, you know, what would they be concerned about? You know, health and safety, the odor issue, and they're nice to look at, right? I mean, the public, you know, if we send out, you know, a form letter or something like that, you know, people are going to read it and think, what's this? Is it a, you know, is it a bill? Or, you know, what are they trying to sell me? But if you can make something that's, you know, graphically pleasing and has some pictures and, you know, it's piques a little bit of interest, I think that's great. If you want to switch, Geneva, public access tools. Again, these are types of tools that are sort of designed to drive participation in the community and build sort of a sense of cooperation. Again, you see that word fear there. I mean, I think that's sometimes one of the worst things. You know, if people are afraid of what's going on, they don't understand, you know, they kind of go to the worst part of, you know, outcome that they're expecting. You know, so you can use door knocks. I work on a lot of projects where, you know, we try to communicate with people through the mail or, you know, sometimes phone calls, but gosh, you know, sometimes just getting out in the neighborhood and knocking on people's doors is really effective for, you know, not only informing people, but building partnerships within the community. You know, sometimes you can find that really, you know, eager person in the community that, you know, is really happy to tell all the neighbors about this really cool sewer project that you're working on or whatever it may be. You know, sometimes we call them sidewalk engineers, those people that are, you know, from the neighborhood that are really super interested in what you're doing. You know, those are great people to get on your side, and they can be great partners and ambassadors for your project. Next is website and multimedia tools. You know, websites are great tools. And again, like anything else, you know, it's got to be thoughtful. You don't just want to throw something up. That Fort Bragg project that I had mentioned, where people were, you know, super upset about the dioxins going off site. The way that we brought that one around was designing a really, really slick website. We actually had people that would go out. I mean, this project was cool. You know, it's right along the coast. I mean, they were going to really improve this. It was awesome. People just didn't know about it. So we had people that, you know, we actually took video of, you know, kind of if you were walking along this coastal trail and what it would look like when it was all cleaned up. And that was super helpful. And again, by the end, you know, gosh, I think maybe a year after we rolled things out, I mean, they stopped maintaining the website and took it down because people were, you know, so convinced and turned around and supportive that they didn't even really need it anymore. So those are great tools, and they really, you know, they touch people where they are, which is nice. And then the next slide talks a little bit about kind of complaint management. So obviously I talked a little bit about that on the case study that I talked about. But having a system in place if people have questions. That's a big thing when we do fact sheets. Sometimes that's like the most important thing you can put on there is who can they call if they have a question. It's the worst if somebody's, upset about something or has a question and they're spinning their wheels. We've all been in that situation when you're on the phone and you just want to get your question answered and you can't quite get to the right person. So having a system in place that people can get to the right person, feel listened to, and, know that something's going to be done or, attempt to be done and they're going to get some resolution, whatever that may be, that's super important. And then one last thing that I wanted to put up here, in talking about this process, it's, sorry, I've got some background noise where I am, sorry about that. Project big or small, I think, this is running through this process of, thinking about how the public may react, who may get upset, how many people may be affected. Sometimes if the project's really small, I say, we don't need to do that. We're just doing this one, little improvement project over here. Nobody's going to care. We'll be done. We'll be out of there. But even spending a half an hour just working through something like this matrix that's up here, just to kind of tick through, who may be upset? Who do I need to think about? The residents. Are there any, community groups that I need to let them know about this work? Is there a school nearby? Is there a park? Are there any events? Just spending a half an hour thinking through it. You don't necessarily, need to communicate with all those people right away, but knowing that they're out there, so if they call and they're upset, you can be prepared for it and be ready to respond. Again, thinking about the case study I gave you for the project in Chicago, you don't want to get flat-footed and get caught in a situation where you're like, somebody calls you and you're like, I don't know what's going on. It puts you in a better position of, credibility with the project and can really set things up in a good way going forward. So just to kind of wrap it all up a little bit, how do we communicate effectively? And again, as I said at the start, it's tricky. There's experts in this field that, write books and lecture on the topic. So it's not easy. But I think, there's a few things that you can think through and to help you do it effectively. I mean, at first, I touched on it a few times, is to practice empathy. Put yourself in the people's shoes and think about really how, whatever the project may be, how it might affect them. From the small scale, schedule. Are you going to be working from 7 to 3? Or it's 8 to 5? Is there going to be weekend work, evening work? To larger issues of, we're digging up your whole street and, you're not going to be able to use your driveway for 2 weeks. Just thinking through all the ways that people that can be affected is great. Again, so you're not caught flat-footed, and you can be proactive about informing these people about what's going on. Be whole brain. I don't know, I'm sure I've got a lot of engineers on the line, but sometimes engineers and scientists aren't the best writers. And are really excited about all the technical and the cool science and engineering and can talk about that in a really smart way. But sometimes doesn't translate very well to, your average citizen. Something that somebody always tells me is that if you're writing like a fact sheet or something, you should write it so your mom or your grandma understands it. Of course, if your mom or grandma's an engineer, then, that changes it. But, make it accessible and meaningful and really look at it from that perspective. And you know what, if you're not good at writing that way, find somebody who is. There's lots of people that can kind of translate information into a way that's understandable for any audience. And again, at the beginning I said too, make it an essential part of the project. Don't wait till there's a crisis, right? So plan for it at the onset. Again, go through that exercise, that matrix. Think about who you need to communicate with and when. Again, maybe you don't necessarily have to send out a fact sheet at the beginning of the project, but on a big project, maybe you do. There's a significant milestone. You want to send out a fact sheet, that's great. But think through and make it part of the schedule and part of the planning. And again, build yourself a toolbox. So, we went through some of the tools, and there's a lot more. that you can use, but use, again, the best tool for an audience. So, like I said, sometimes door knocks are the best for a community that's not super engaged. Sometimes a community meeting is good, but maybe you haven't had success with that on your other project, so that might not be the best. So use a variety of tools. Be prepared to use another one if the first one doesn't work. I'm working on a project now where we've tried to set up an electronic survey, and our response was dismal. And we found that going out and knocking on doors was much, much more effective. So be prepared to be adaptive and use another tool if you need to. And then again, make an investment. I touched on this at the beginning too. Sometimes on these projects you say, gosh, it's going to cost us more money. It's going to add to our budget if we have to, put together a fact sheet and have an open house at the start of this project. But again, if you make that investment up front and get people on your side, it can help you hopefully overcome a crisis and, extra money spent on doing additional outreach or, completely, in the worst case, revamping your project. So that's it. I don't know if anybody has any questions, sort of just a snapshot, but.
Everyone's lines have been unmuted, so if you do have a question, please feel free to ask it. And if in case you've muted your own line, please don't hesitate to take your own mute off. We have ours off.
All right. Well, you guys are easy. So, I mean, if you have any questions, my contact information is up there. So feel free to shoot me an email. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bridget. We are going to go ahead, and if there are no other questions, I don't know if I had heard a start of one a moment ago. You're welcome to use the chat box throughout the session. If you think of one in the middle of Beverly's presentation, don't hesitate to let us know. We can address it at the very end. If not, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presentation over to Beverly, and we'll introduce her. She is the president of Maylene Communications and the co-chair of this wonderful committee. So thank you, Beverly, and the presentation is yours.
Thank you so much. As Geneva said, I'm Beverly Nossinger with Maylene Communications, and while I have 30 years working in many of the communications toolkit items that Bridget brought up, what I want to do today is drill down into the idea of using social media on your project. Some of you may already have a social media plan, and some of you may be dipping your toes into the water without a real formal plan. In either case, I'm hoping this presentation can help you develop an effective plan or tweak the one that you have. First, I think it's important to understand what you would like to accomplish and who your audience is. So let's start with the why. Let's look at some of the reasons you may want to use social media. For instance, to notify residents and businesses about water outages, street closures, to share your feel-good stories, to build a positive impression with your community, and as Bridget said, for crisis communications. And there may be some others that are specific to your agency or your community. So who's using social media? Well, pretty much everybody. At least a pretty good majority of us are. What I want to do is take a little time to understand who's using social media based on the age of the audience, so that you understand how to shape your social media platform. The Pew Research Center has tracked the percentage of adults using social media since 2005. And what you can see is there's a dramatic rise over time. Initially, only 8% of the adults were using social media, and that has risen to 74%, as you see on the red line. It's important to note that while there has been a steady rise in all of the age ranges, those in the 50 to 64-year range are only at 65%, and those that are 65 and older are less than 50%. Understanding this can help you target your message. So what I want to do is take a look at some of the statistics for some of the basic social media platforms most of you have probably heard of. The first being Facebook. Pew Research says that 71% of adults are using Facebook. And you'll see that Facebook hits on a lot of the demographics. They're near or over 70% by gender, by race, by location, by age, by education, by income. So, Facebook is all we need, right? Maybe not. If we take a look at Twitter, and yes, this is my Twitter page, while 23% of online adults are using Twitter, I think what's important to note here is that by age, it's doing best with those in the 18 to 29-year range. Global Social Media Impact Study observed that people 16 to 18 found Facebook use was in sharp decline. They're turning to simpler services and apps like Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat. Facebook has become uncool, and they're keeping their profiles live purely to stay in touch with their older relatives. Unfortunately, I'm in that category. So let's take a look at Instagram. Instagram is a photo and short video sharing service for mobile devices that was founded in 2010. Pictures taken with the Instagram app can be sent to Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Flickr, so forth. Now, 26% of online adults are using Instagram, which is a little higher than Twitter, but still not as strong as Facebook. However, it appears that Instagram has edged out Facebook and Twitter in terms of prestige among younger users. Teens now describe Instagram as most important for them. Snapchat. Snapchat is a pretty cool mobile messaging service that allows you to send a photo or video to someone that lasts only up to 10 seconds before it disappears. Business Insider says that Snapchat is the youngest social network of all by age of user, and that 6 out of 10 Snapchat users are in the 18 to 24 age group. So before we go too much further, I wanted to explain why I think it's important to reach out to teens using social media from your perspective. If you're making a social media plan, they're not the ones that are paying your bills. However, the statistics on teen deaths is enough to at least ask yourself to consider what the social media plan can and should do to reach teens. The National Vital Statistics System on Mortality says that while 40...
I kind of have to beg them sometimes.
Oh, I beg.
I'm sorry?
Beverly, we had a late joiner. We've gotten that taken care of. Please continue.
Okay, sorry. The National Vital Statistics System on Mortality says that while 48% of teen deaths are caused by unintentional injury, when they drill down, of that 48%, 73% was due to motor vehicle traffic accidents, followed by unintentional poisoning and unintentional drowning. My hope is that with sharing these statistics, you'll understand the cost-benefit ratio of reaching out to teens and include that in your assessment of social media ROI, return on investment, when deciding who to reach out to and how. For instance, if you think about maybe your worst-case scenario, a waterline break that erodes a street, making a road closure necessary, or a boil water alert after a hurricane knocks out power. These could be reasons to include in your social media plan outreach to teens. So this is a pretty cool graphic. This is called the Conversation Prism. The Conversation Prism was created by Brian Solis in 2008, and he developed this visual map as part of an ongoing study to follow dominant and promising social networks, and it's organized to show their application in everyday life. While you can easily pick out Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, you can see that most of us are only familiar with a very small portion of a vast array of what's available, and it grows every day. So the method you select is most effective today may be very different a year from now. Your social media plan needs to be dynamic. You'll need to be nimble enough to learn what you can about new platforms, ascertain their staying power, and move to the platforms that now target your audiences best. So let's go back to some of those social media apps that I showed earlier and think now in terms of what we could be making use, how we could be making use of them. So here we go with Facebook. As we saw from the statistics, Facebook is great exposure. Some things to consider though. Some people post every day, all day long, every moment of their day. But some people don't use it daily. So it shouldn't be necessarily seen immediately. And maybe it should not be your first choice for crisis communication. However, it's a great way to promote your feel-good stories. For instance, this is one I found online. OCWA, Central New York's Water Authority, and they're using it to let their friends know about a memorial dedication ceremony for one of their previous chairmen. It was followed by a couple of photos and a short update on the construction of a new water tank. Great use for Facebook. I searched to see if OCWA also had other social media, but they didn't. However, I did find a Twitter page for the Water Authority of Western Nassau County. What I found on their Twitter page was what I was hoping to find. They had a discolored water alert, a disruption of service alert, water main flushing. If you have limited time and resources for social media, personally, I feel that you should focus on the most important value each platform can give you. For Twitter, I feel that Twitter can be used exceedingly well for emergency alerts or timely reminders in 140 characters. Instagram. So I was hoping that also that the Water Authority of Western Nassau County had an Instagram account, but they didn't. So I found Toho Water Authority's Instagram account. And what I found is, if you see on the left side, they're running a contest to take a sip, post a pic. The question is, why do you think they're trying to encourage their residents to participate in this kind of a contest? Imagine you have an Instagram account and you encourage your residents to post pictures of your community. Certainly, you want to monitor these posts to make sure they're appropriate. However, what you're after is the connection to these people. As you can see from Toho Water, they have 160 followers. It's not a ton, but it's a start. So you go back to your discolored water alert tweet and imagine that it goes out to all of the people following you. With the right message, you can go viral when you need to, which in an emergency can literally be life-saving. So, virality. This is a new word, at least to me. It just means the tendency of something you posted, tweeted, so forth, to be reposted or retweeted. For example, here's the Dalai Lama's Twitter feed. Imagine the good you could do with his followers. And I particularly love the tweet that was on his feed the day that I made this screen capture. Because society is the basis of our own happiness, it makes sense for us to take care of others. And isn't that what you do every day in the field that you chose to work in? So, which media platforms? It's really a function of a little formula that I've come up with. I think it's immediacy plus age equals the platform. So let's look at some of the reasons that we talked about earlier to consider social media to begin with. You've got a utility outage or a flooded street. Consider this crisis management. Hit every platform, but keep it short and to the point. And this assumes that you're already using email alerts and text alerts. We're just focusing on social media. So now let's look at street closures due to construction, project updates. Those are a more normal level. Hit Facebook and Twitter, but once again, keep it short and to the point. Now we're going to showcase our success stories. These are low level and I believe belong on Facebook. The other platforms will hit your customers immediately and be seen right away, but if you overuse them, people will unfollow you and you'll find yourself left out in the cold. It's like parents that yell at their kids all the time. Eventually the kids tune it out. You want to know that when you send out a critical alert, it will be viewed and considered. Also, all of these platforms make feedback available. You'll want to monitor the feedback to make sure it's appropriate and react to their posts in a thoughtful way, but also keep it short and to the point. So let's talk a little bit about return on investment for social media. For your audience, this is not really something that can be measured in dollars and cents. You're not selling t-shirts and you can tell how many t-shirts you've purchased and whether or not the price is appropriate and how much of revenue you're getting. And I don't want to be over dramatic, but I think for what you all do, social media return on investment has a whole lot more to do with things that save lives and save dollars in your community. So investing in social media for you is a lot like what got you into this field to begin with, being a part of the greater good. This image that I've captured came from the Flint, Michigan water crisis. And as someone in this part of the field in community outreach, I have to ask myself, what could they have done better to be more proactive with this situation? So when you're looking at your return on investment, I think what you need to do is establish the platforms you're going to use and set goals for each year. For instance, with Facebook, track your annual posts. Track how many people have liked your page. Track how many posts are reposted, especially the ones that are more critical. Track how many likes you get on your posts. Track the feedback you get. This can be critical to understanding your relationship with your community. And in summary, here's some things that I would like you to consider. Consider your audience. You need to understand the demographics of your area and develop a plan to cover the various ages, incomes, so forth, of your community. Consider your message. You have a variety of messages you will want to convey. Categorize them so you can decide which platform applies and when. Virality, we talked about how to shape your message so that it goes viral when you most need it to. Criticality. Know which platform you should use at the various levels of immediacy. And then reassess annually. Social media will never be static. As we saw before, we hear all the time about new applications being added. Engage your teens and young adults. And that doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. You can meet with key clubs at the high schools, get with student groups at local colleges, help them understand what you're trying to accomplish, and they will help you shape your social media plan for their age groups. You'll need a public outreach to introduce your social media plan, to encourage your residents and businesses to like your various platforms, but it's an effort that's well worth it. And then once again, feedback. You have to have a thick hide. You may not always receive positive feedback. You will certainly want to delete any that are not appropriate, but don't delete everything negative. Your audience will likely tune you out if they think you're not open to constructive criticism. If someone posts a valid complaint, be prepared to look into it and offer an apology if it's warranted. Your ultimate goal is to develop a strong relationship with your community, and like any strong relationship, it has to be open, honest, and supportive. With that, I would like to conclude by saying this is by no means a comprehensive look at social media for utilities. There's just too much and it's changing too fast to get it all in 30 minutes. But hopefully it's a starting point for your organization to understand a little bit more about social media landscape and make you more comfortable taking the plunge. And with that, I will take any questions if anyone has any.
All lines have been unmuted again, so please feel free to ask any questions you might have of Beverly and or Bridget.
Hi, Beverly. This is Keenan Howell. I'm with the Prince William County Service Authority.
Hi, Keenan.
Hi. One of the things that I was wondering about when it comes to Snapchat, we do a lot of youth-oriented events. And so would the process basically be creating a Snapchat account for our utility and then encouraging the young people that we reach out to sort of like friend us on Snapchat, and then we can Snapchat during events?
Absolutely. It's one of the hardest processes, I think, is to build your followers. And so what you may need to do is to start with some of the people in your organization to set the tone. Have them take some Snapchats of themselves, things going on around your utility, things that you're doing, and then you can go through your own contacts. The people that are following you on Facebook, a lot of times are also, you find those people that are also on Snapchat. And so you start to connect through one of your applications. You reach out then to other people that are using other applications. But like I said, it almost has to be a public relations outreach to say, this is what we're doing, and this is how you can follow us. For instance, you see my contact information there, and I'm telling you not only am I available by email, by phone, here's my Facebook, here's my Twitter, here's my Instagram, here's my Snapchat. This is how you find me. When I looked at the first utility page that I looked at on Facebook, I wanted to know whether or not they had a Twitter account. I went to their website, and at the bottom of their website, they're just on Facebook. So you put out on your Facebook page all the various applications that you use. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, just like this, like you're seeing on the screen right now. And it's a slow process, but the more you can take those out to your community events and start to engage them, the more followers you will get when you need them.
So Beverly, one of the things that we do is we do, and this is just sort of to put out there for everyone on the call, we have we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and we have all of those on our website. We also put all of those icons and our account names on all of our outreach materials, our newsletters, everything like that. We have them cascading. So for instance, what's posted to Instagram cascades to Facebook, cascades to Twitter. And then we have a live Twitter feed on our website homepage. So one of the things I was thinking about as relates to Snapchat, because that's not one of the tools that we've leveraged yet, is actually promoting a Snapchat account through our existing social media channels.
I absolutely think that's a great idea. But once again, think in terms of not overusing Facebook. If you're automatically cascading from Facebook, then all of those sort of feel-good stories are going to your Twitter account and your Instagram account and so forth. And what happens then is that especially the young people will start to tune it out because what they're seeing is the same thing they see on your Facebook account. What you want is to use these other social media applications for those things you need them to pay attention to, right? It's one thing if they're or they're posting something to you for Instagram, that's one thing. But when you send out your social media applications outside of Facebook, should be more related to things I need you to look at now.
Got it.
Right? And if they're cascading automatically, they're seeing a lot of, oh, we did this and we did that, and so they may just stop paying attention to it. And so that's when I talked about that level of immediacy. When you really need them to know and pay attention, you can't send those feel-good stories.
Sure. So using the specific social media channels based on that demographic information.
Right. It's really about the criticality of your message.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Any others? Okay. Well, so on behalf of the Virginia Section AWWA Water Awareness and Outreach Committee, I just want to thank you for attending our second seminar for 2016, and hope that you will join us for the next one that we're planning for the fall. You all have a great day.